Dross, I'm writing to you from Peru. I'm not one of those who usually tell this kind of thing, but after thinking about it a lot for years, I decided to share with you an experience that marked me since I was a child and that only now, after so many years, I feel I can tell without my voice trembling. When I was little I had a younger sister, her name was Valeria. Everyone told me that Valeria had died of meningitis when I was about 5 years old. I was very young, but I still have some scattered memories of Valeria playing with me in the dirt yard of the house in Comas, in the north of Lima. I remember the smell of wet earth after the short winter drizzles, the noise of the buses that passed along Avenida Elmer Fawcett a few blocks away and the shout of street vendors offering pan con chicharron from the corner. Valeria was 3 years old and always wore the same faded pink little dress. However, there was always something strange. At home we almost never talked about Valeria. The photos where she appeared were kept in an old hardcover album that no one opened. It was as if Valeria's existence was uncomfortable. The house where we lived was on a narrow street in Comas, near the intersection with Avenida Universitaria. It was a single-story dwelling with walls painted a green faded by the saltpeter. My mother cooked in a small kitchen with a wooden table where the three of us ate in silence. My father, a quiet man who worked as a driver for a transportation company, left very early to drive long routes to the north of the country. Trujillo, sometimes all the way to Peru. He would return days later smelling of gasoline and road dust, and as soon as he crossed the door he would sit in the chair in the living room without saying much. Years later I began to suspect from half-conversations between uncles and cousins during family visits in the backyard and looks that didn't know how to lie that Valeria was not my father's daughter. Apparently she had been the result of my mother's infidelity with a man from the neighborhood, one of those who worked in construction on the buildings that were going up around Avenida Universitaria. The guy lived 3 blocks away in a house similar to ours, with rusty bars and a dog that barked all night. The news hit like a rock. My father found out shortly after Valeria's birth. Although he continued living with my mother in that same house in Comas, he never got over it. What came after was a silent hell that lasted for years. Although he continued sharing the bed and the table with my mother, he lived reproaching her for it constantly. There were little comments at the table during dinner. For example, "This bone tastes like horns," and other very uncomfortable things. There were long silences during the nights when the TV was off and you could only hear the buzzing of the old refrigerator and doors that slammed shut in the short hallway that connected the living room to the bedrooms. My dad never was the same again. He became a cold, reserved man and increasingly distant. He spent more time away driving on the highways to Juarez or Trujillo. When he was home, he locked himself in the back room or went out to smoke in the backyard looking at the brick wall that separated our house from the neighbors. With time I became a teenager and I started to doubt and if Valeria had not died of natural causes. There was something that didn't add up. Her death seemed too convenient for a man who carried that betrayal with him every day. Meningitis was the official explanation they gave at the Dos de Mayo hospital, where they took her one night with a high fever, but the details never quite closed. No one talked about how Valeria had gotten worse so fast. One day, moreover, I discovered in the basement of the house that dark and damp space under the living room that you went down to by a wooden staircase that creaked with each step, a container of antifreeze. It was hidden behind some boxes with used clothes and old tools, covered in dust and cobwebs. I never understood why it was there, since my father didn't even have his own car. He used the company truck. As you know, Dross, that liquid, antifreeze, can kill a person without leaving obvious traces. Much more easily a small girl. Also, my mother would cry alone in the kitchen when she thought no one could hear her. She would sit on the wooden chairs by the window that looked out to the yard and cry with her face in her hands while the smell of chicken and rice stuck to the walls. I never confronted anyone directly. The fear of breaking what little was left of the family always stopped me. Years passed, I moved to a smaller apartment in Los Olivos. A few blocks from the old house, but I still visit my mother on Sundays. She is already elderly with completely white hair and still lives in that same house in Comas. Every time I go into the basement to look for something, I look at the corner where the container was and I feel the same weight on my chest. My father died 5 years ago of a heart attack while driving on the highway to Trujillo. He left without saying one more word about Valeria. However, one night when my father had drunk too much, he gave me the closest thing to a confession that he could make. He simply looked at me fixedly with his face hardened by the years and asked me to forgive him. I asked him, "Forgive you for what, Dad?" And he simply answered me, "You already know why." I remember it as if it were today and I didn't dare to continue the conversation. There are things that time doesn't erase, it only makes them heavier. I appreciate you. He will be reading your comments. Thank you very much. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up and share your opinions.